The morning I drove up the dirt road and saw a pile of splintered pine where my cabin used to be, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, engine ticking, and thought, you people really did this. That cabin had been standing longer than the county courthouse. My grandfather built it with his brothers after he came back from Korea. No permits back then, no subdivisions, no associations, just land, timber, and work. My family had paid taxes on that parcel since Eisenhower was president. I grew up fishing the creek behind it, splitting wood on the same stump my dad used, sleeping under a tin roof that sang when it rained. It sat on 40 acres of mixed hardwood and scrub, 10 miles outside a town most people pass through without noticing. No sidewalks, no streetlights, one gas station, one diner, one blinking yellow light, and no HOA. At least, there wasn't one until about 5 years ago. That's when a developer bought the neighboring cattle land and carved it into a rustic luxury community. Gated entrance, gravel roads with fancy names like Cedar Hollow Way, cabins that looked old but weren't, the kind of place where people wanted the idea of rural life without the mud or the noise or the neighbors who'd actually been there first. They called it Pine Ridge Estates, and they formed an HOA. The first letter came in a plain white envelope. Notice of non-compliance. They claimed my property fell within their expanded jurisdiction, said I owed 3 years of back dues, listed violations like unapproved exterior structure, non-conforming roofing material, improper waste management. That one was about my burn barrel. I laughed when I read it. I honestly thought it was a mistake. So I drove over to their little office by the gate, double-wide trailer with stone veneer glued to the front. Inside sat a man named Carl Hensley, HOA president, retired middle manager type, clean boots that had never seen mud. He didn't offer me a chair. "You're past due," he said, flipping through a folder like he already knew how this would go. "I'm not in your HOA," I told him. "My land was deeded in 1954. Your subdivision stops at the old fence line." He smiled like I'd said something cute. "Our survey shows otherwise." I asked to see it. He slid a color map across the desk. Bright lines, clean edges, my cabins squarely inside their boundary. "That map's wrong," I said, "and even if it wasn't, you don't just absorb land because you feel like it." Carl leaned back. "You can argue all you want. The board voted. You owe $9,600 plus penalties." I stood up. "I'm not paying you a dime." That's when his smile disappeared. "Then we'll proceed with enforcement." Over the next 2 months, the letters kept coming, fines stacking up, threats of liens. One notice said they'd remediate non-compliant structures at owner's expense. I called the county clerk. They confirmed what I already knew. My parcel was never annexed, never rezoned, never subjected to any HOA covenant. I sent Carl copies of my deed, the original survey from the 50s, tax receipts older than he was. He sent back a single-page response. "Documents received, determination unchanged." The next confrontation happened at the gate. He'd stopped my truck like he owned the road. "You can't just ignore us," he said. "I can when you don't exist on my land," I answered. He pointed a finger at my chest. "You think because you're local, you're untouchable." I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him my sister worked for the DOJ, or that my cousin was a federal land use investigator, or that my uncle had spent 25 years with the U.S. Marshals. I just said, "This ends badly for you." 3 weeks later, I got the notice taped to my cabin door. "Final action, structure scheduled for removal." I called the number. Voicemail. I drove into town to file an injunction. The clerk told me the HOA had already submitted paperwork claiming emergency safety violations, structural collapse, environmental hazard. All lies. By the time my hearing date came around, The damage was already done. They brought in a contractor, bulldozer, dumpster, reduced my family's cabin to debris in one afternoon. Standing there, looking at the wreckage, I finally made a call I'd been putting off. I said, "They picked the wrong property," and my sister said very calmly, "Send me everything." The first person to walk the site wasn't a lawyer. It was the county sheriff. He didn't say much, just took pictures, measured the pad, picked up a chunk of foundation and turned it over in his hands. "They didn't have a court order," he said. "No," I answered. "They had confidence." 2 days later, I met with an attorney out of the next county. Quiet woman, former land use litigator. She didn't raise her voice once. She spread my documents across the table, then added a few more. "That HOA filed an amended plat 4 years ago," she said. "It includes your land." I never signed anything. "You didn't need to," she replied. "They forged a county acknowledgement, used an outdated surveyor's stamp." That's when things got real. Because falsifying land records isn't an HOA issue, it's a felony. My sister forwarded everything to an internal contact. No favors asked, just a question. Is this worth a look? Apparently it was. Within a month, the state land office opened a review, then the attorney general's office, then, quietly, a federal inquiry, because the forged documents had been used to secure loans tied to interstate banks. Carl didn't know any of that when he walked into the courthouse for the civil hearing. He looked confident, brought 3 board members, a binder full of color maps. The judge asked one question: "Who prepared this survey?" Carl hesitated. "A licensed professional." The judge turned to our side. My attorney slid forward the original 1954 survey, then the county's certified boundary map, then an affidavit from the actual surveyor whose stamp had been used, sworn statement saying he'd never worked that land. The courtroom went quiet. Carl started talking fast, blaming a consultant, saying it was a misunderstanding. The judge stopped him mid-sentence. "This court is referring this matter for criminal review." 2 weeks later, Pine Ridge Estates was served with a stop order, all collections frozen, liens voided, titles under review. The contractor who demolished my cabin testified next. He said Carl told him they owned the structure now, paid in cash, no paperwork. That contractor lost his license. Carl lost more than that. By the end of summer, the HOA board was dissolved. 3 members resigned. 1 was charged alongside Carl with fraud and falsification of records. The development's lender pulled financing. Home sales froze. As for me, the court ordered full restitution, not just the cabin's value, but historical replacement costs, emotional damages, legal fees. They also issued a declaratory judgment. My land was never and would never be part of any HOA. The last time I saw Carl was at the gas station. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That fall, I rebuilt the cabin. Same footprint, same tin roof, used some of the old foundation stones I could salvage. No gate, no dues, no letters. Just land that remembered who it belonged to. Standing there at dusk, creek running like it always had, I thought about how close arrogance comes to power, and how paper trails outlast both. I split a piece of firewood, set it by the door, and went inside. Some places don't need permission to stand.